My career plan never included to become a stay at hospital mom. My career plan, I never envisioned myself being a stay at home mom. And so I knew that at some point in time, I didn't know when and I didn't know how, but I knew that at some point I would go back to work and I would start my career again. And that was sort of the big turning point for us.
Welcome to Flip Your Script, the podcast about life's critical turning points and how people find the inspiration and motivation to move forward and rewrite their unique stories. Produced by Media Minefield, the show is hosted by Kristi, who flipped her script from an Emmy-winning journalist to a successful entrepreneur and speaker.
Like so many people, Mike and Gaby Grinberg had a plan for their lives, and it looked pretty good on paper. They were successful in their marketing careers and were starting a family. But then Gaby went into preterm labor and their daughter Lana was born, weighing, get this, less than a pound. The events that followed in their personal lives forced Mike and Gaby to flip their scripts in their professional lives. Mike and Gaby, welcome to the Flip Your Script podcast.
Thank you, Kristi, for having us. We're very excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So your story is in some ways similar to mine in that your professional life is going a direction and you are very planned out, very type A, I suspect, that everything is working out. And then all of a sudden something happens and you're forced to flip everything as you know it. And you have a choice to make. Either we're going to make this better and work, or the other option is not a positive one. So tell me about, Gaby, you are starting a family and you go into labor and it's nothing like what you were reading about and Googling and the beautiful stories you see on TV.
Absolutely. So our lives changed literally, dramatically. On Sunday, August 16th, 2015 at 9:01 a.m., I had an emergency C-section at 24 weeks. And like you said in the intro, our daughter was born less than a pound. She was 11 ounces at birth. Just to give some perspective, a can of Lacroix is 12 ounces. And our daughter was 11 ounces. The average full-term baby today can be anywhere from 5 pounds to 9 pounds and change on the big side. So our daughter was less than a pound. She was 24 weeks. And like you said, Kristi, our script definitely flipped when she came into our lives. We were not anticipating that. I had developed very severe preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome between my 20th week and my 23rd week of pregnancy. During the 20th week, it was all we knew was that I was high risk. We didn't know what that meant. We didn't know what was in store. And between weeks 21, 22, and 23, these symptoms just kept getting worse and worse and worse until finally Mike and I decided, okay, something's not right. We need to go to the hospital. And we went to the hospital at the beginning of my 23rd week of pregnancy. I had severe chest pain. I had labored breathing. I thought for sure I was having a heart attack. And it was very severe preeclampsia. I had 190/120 for my blood pressure, which is very high. It's in the range of potentially having a stroke. And I was 31 years old at the time. I thought for sure strokes are things that only old men get, in your 70s and 80s. When the doctor told me that I could be at risk for having a stroke, it just didn't compute. It didn't make any sense to me what was going on and what was happening. And we were told that we were going to be in this hospital until either A, my symptoms subside to a point where I can go home safely, or B, if my symptoms continue to worsen, we would have to deliver our daughter.
So, Mike, you're watching your wife go through all of this. You have not yet met this baby, and some women at 23 weeks are barely showing, so it's hardly real for the man because there is nothing to touch and hold. And tell me about what it was like for you watching all of that, because you couldn't help.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to even think back to the time because I feel like our brains sort of block a lot of it out. But I mean, it got real in the roughly the 20th week. That's when they told us that Gaby was high risk. Her pregnancy was high risk. At 21 weeks, we kind of knew that we had a little bit more idea of that there was a problem. The baby was growth restricted, etc. And we were just sort of at that point trying to keep as positive an attitude as possible. When we ended up in the hospital, sort of the only thing going through my head was trying to kind of keep a level head and make sure that at least I wasn't freaking out about, at least not externally. And that was, and then through the week that we were in the hospital, kind of trying to prolong the pregnancy, it was kind of the same thing. I feel like my job was pretty much to, talk to the docs, talk to the nurses, get whatever info, and then relay that to, our parents and whatnot, and just be there for support. And that was kind of it. It was kind of surreal because, I can't do it. Technically, neither of us could do anything. I mean, the only thing Gaby could do is just sit there in bed too. It's one of those things where they still don't know exactly what causes preeclampsia, right? So it's the docs, the only they can do is, try to give some preventative measures, and then sort of a hope and pray kind of thing.
And for people who don't know, I mean, you talked about a Lacroix can. That's crazy to think about that. How, like when you couldn't hold her, I'm sure right away, but how was she, like the size of your hand? Was she the size of a banana? Like how big was she?
I always say that the best example I could say is pick up your cell phone, hold it in your palm. It's about the same weight and length.
Yeah.
That's insane.
And not the big ones. I'm talking like the smaller cell phones. She was 10 and a half inches when she was born?
10 and a half inches at birth, 11 ounces, so 330 grams for those that use the metric system. And we were not able to hold her, like take her out of her isolette for 8 weeks. It was 2 months after her birth before we could actually hold our daughter.
We were able to put our hands in.
We could put our hands in the isolette.
3 weeks in, something like that.
Yeah, but she was very fragile. I mean, if you think about a baby bird that's born, that's just freshly hatched, they're featherless, their skin is translucent, their eyes are fused. You can kind of see dark spots that make up their internal organs. And that's kind of what our daughter looked like. She did not look like a person. It was kind of, if you've never seen a premature child, it's a very jarring experience because they don't look like babies. They're just
surreal is the way to put it, because it's not something that you expect.
It's not something that you see every day. This child at 23 weeks is really supposed to still be inside cooking in the oven. And here she was, out in the flesh, and she was tiny and her eyes were fused shut. We could see the dark spot of her liver, and we could make out her beating heart, and we could see the outlines of her rib cage and her vertebrae. And it was, and yet we just were so in love with this child. She was here, and we were going to do everything that we possibly could do to give her the best chance at life, knowing that a lot of it was out of our hands in those early moments.
So she's out of you. She's in the hands of doctors. You can't do anything to help her except to pray and to heal Gaby, because you had just had a C-section procedure and you were sick going into that procedure. So you're in the hospital. You entered that hospital as two working people with successful careers. And when something like this happens in your life, the last thing you think about is your profession. You think about your personal life. I mean, perspective really takes over. Suddenly, none of that matters. And our only one thing is to make sure that this baby comes out as healthy as possible and we bring her home. Yeah. And during that time in the hospital, you did lose your job, right, Gaby?
I did. It was not even a week after my C-section. I received an email from my employer at the time indicating that he could no longer keep my job available to me. And that was, to say the least, insult to injury. What is the saying? Adding insult to injury. At the time, I carried the health insurance for the family because I had a great health insurance through this employer. And that was our first concern was, oh my God, what do we do with health insurance? We have a critical child in the hospital. I just went through an emergency C-section. I still had quite a bit of healing to do from the preeclampsia. That was our first concern. And our second concern is, holy crap, we went from a dual income family to a single income family with a very critical child. And who knows what the future is going to hold? Who knows what expenses and medical bills we are going to be racking up. And so that was tremendously stressful, to say the least. At the time, we contacted a dear friend of ours who's a lawyer, and we asked her, we said, look, is this legal? Can this even happen? What do we do? What is our course of action? And she's not an employment lawyer, so she connected us to two colleagues, and we got on the phone with them. And long story short, because it was a private company, less than 50 people, Minnesota employment laws did not apply in this situation. So essentially, I was, that was our reality. I lost my job. My employer was not willing or able to keep my job open for me. And the reality kind of quickly set in that I was going to be what I call a stay-at-hospital mom, because our daughter was in for a very long journey. All in all, she was in the hospital for 6 months, 172 days. And during that time, my job was to be at the hospital every day. Almost every day I went to the hospital, and Mike was there with me a couple days a week. And that was an incredibly challenging time to be in a very vulnerable state as a new family, and then not have the security of my job. That was incredibly vulnerable, and it was a huge slap in the face. It was a reality that we were just not ready to have to deal with.
So on behalf of everyone listening, let me just say, are you kidding me? Like, it's not like is it a gentleman, a man? I don't want to use the wrong pronoun. It's a male. Okay.
It was a male business owner. Yes.
So, and we're not going to name him, no matter how much I want to right now start a letter writing campaign, but we won't. So he knows you're pregnant. This isn't a surprise. Like, he knew that you were pregnant. He knew at some point you were going to have a child. Then your baby is born early. You're in a very vulnerable place. You don't know if your baby's going to live, and you lose your job and health insurance. Shame on him. It's completely over the line and inappropriate and uncalled for. And this is pre-COVID, just so people don't think that, maybe the world changed underneath that business. The business knew you were pregnant. The business is still in business, I believe, based on how you're talking about it. And you lost your job. That's terrible. Yeah. Okay, my rant is over. I just had to let it out.
I hear you, Kristi, and believe me, Mike and I, we went through that same anger and disgust and frustration. I will say, though, with everything, there is a silver lining. And I don't want to give this person credit for this. I will say, though, that he was generous in that he gave me my 12 weeks of maternity leave, which included, full pay and full benefits during those 12 weeks. And during those 12 weeks, we did have my income. We did have the health insurance and other benefits. After those 12 weeks were up, essentially my job was dissolved. So that was the least that he could do. That was the least that he could do, and we appreciated that. And like I said, the silver lining was that was the beginning of us being able to flip our script. That was us, unbeknownst to us at the time, because our focus was on our daughter. Our focus was on this tiny little baby. But we knew at some point down my career plan never included to become a stay-at-hospital mom. My career plan, I never envisioned myself being a stay-at-home mom. And so I knew that at some point in time, I didn't know when and I didn't know how, but I knew that at some point I would go back to work and I would start my career again. And that was sort of the big turning point for us, because when that time came, this was, I'm jumping around a little bit, but when our daughter was just shy of her second birthday, she was 22 months. I had been, like I said, a stay-at-hospital mom and then a stay-at-home mom for those 22 months. I was finally at a point where I was ready to go back to work. I wanted to go back to work. I needed that for myself. Our daughter was thankfully doing very well. At that point in time, we felt comfortable to be able to leave her with a nanny, but we were not comfortable to be away from the home. And that's how essentially our company Proof Point was born, how we decided that we needed to have financial freedom. We needed to have professional freedom, professional, satisfaction and fulfillment. And the only way that we knew how to do that at the time was to combine Mike and we're both in digital marketing. We've spent our whole careers in marketing. We decided, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start a company. And we knew that from that moment on, we were going to take the lessons that we had learned, all the bad things that we had experienced in our career, starting with my losing my job as being the examples of what not to do, and pour that into our company.
And in very, very different circumstance, but I was one of 20 people who was laid off at the TV station in one day. And when I walked into the room to get, essentially my pink slip, the woman who my boss said, "This is harder for me than it is for you." And that statement hit me and has changed how I think about policies, has changed how I think about running a business, has changed all the thing. And I totally get what you're saying, that it is such a gift. And you can sit in the anger of, this isn't fair, and what are they thinking? And how could they do that to me? Or you can say, maybe stay there for a little bit because it's healthy to get it out. And then move to, okay, now what are we going to do now? And absolutely. I love that you went to, what are we going to do now? And I think when you've had an experience with an employer that doesn't feel fair, it changes how you want to live your professional life. And I don't want to ever be in a position where this could happen to me again, the take control piece. And then I want to make sure that I set up a company in a way that I would never do this to someone else.
Absolutely.
And value people in a different way. And that's how you've set up your company. So talk about... I want to make sure everyone knows Lana's doing well and healthy and fine, and she's 4.
She'll be 5 on August 16th. She's delightful. She is funny. She's curious. She's still very petite. If you saw her, you would think, oh, that girl needs to eat some peanut butter sandwiches. Today, she is healthy and beautiful, and we're trying to just keep up with her, actually.
What a miracle.
We have to remind ourselves of how she got here sometimes, because she drives us a bit crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Gaby, did you and Mike come together to say, we're going to do this business, or was it your idea and you took it to him?
That's a whole other flip your script story.
That's another, yeah. I think Mike, you should share a little bit about how we got to Proof Point, because you had a lot to do with that.
When Gaby was let go from her job while being in the hospital, the reality is even if she hadn't been, one of us would have to quit our jobs, because somebody would have to be a full-time caregiver. So either way, our situation would have changed one way or the other, whether we liked it or not. At that point, I was working for a company, and they were great. They're very gracious. I was able to work from the hospital 3 days a week, which it was tough to do, but I did. Every night I would come after work and I'd spend time there, etc. But we were down to only one income, and we'd only bought a house about a year and a half, 2 years before that. I had to pay a mortgage and all that fun stuff. So I decided to take another job, 1, to get less travel, and 2, to get more money coming in. So I started working for a startup here, and I also picked up some freelance clients on the side to try to make up some of that difference. And then about a year into it, we very quickly, kind of overnight, lost funding. The startup did. So company ended up going through bankruptcy. And pretty quickly there, we kind of looked at each other, and I sort of said, all right, well, we got 2 options. We either both go out and get corporate gigs. And this is, Gaby was already ready to go back to work. We were already kind of talking about what that was going to look like anyway. Or we, take these 3 clients that I've got and start working together, build start consulting, build a company, and go from there. And that's how Proof Point happened. It was sort of a whole other kind of, oh crap moment. And we just sort of turned it into something.
This was the summer of 2017. Our daughter
June 2017.
Our daughter was just shy of her second birthday. And when she came home, she was on oxygen. She had continuous oxygen, so she was off oxygen. She had a lot of tummy issues. She had a G tube, a gastric feeding tube. So at the time, we were very concerned. We didn't want her to be in daycare. We needed to be home. We wanted to have a caregiver come to the house so that Mike and I could work. And when his company started to go bankrupt, we kind of saw the writing on the wall. And we said, well, we can't stay here. This is a drowning ship. And we needed a job. He needed a job. We needed an income. So, imagine this. I'm gonna kind of recap this for the audience. We just had a NICU journey, 6 months NICU journey. The journey home was in and of itself a time for another episode for another podcast, because that was a challenge. Our daughter is now just shy of her second birthday. During the first 2 years at home, I had experienced a pretty deep depression. I had experienced a late onset postpartum anxiety, and PTSD from being in the NICU. And I went through a very, very dark period, which I'm grateful to be able to talk about now, but I was suicidal. I did contemplate suicide, and I'm one of the lucky statistics that I received. I was able to recognize what was happening in me, and I sought help from a therapist. And so I'm lucky to be here today. Lana's lucky to be here today. And then at almost 2 years old, Mike and I decide to start a business. So we're pretty crazy people.
That's like a lifetime of things in 24 months.
Yeah, pretty much.
Roughly, yeah.
I lost my job. Mike's company went bankrupt. Our daughter went through some pretty serious medical challenges, even though she's doing well, but the journey to get here was filled with some ups and downs. My health journey obviously took a big curveball. And then through that all, we just decided that the best thing for us would be to be our own boss, have our own business, be able to work from home.
I've talked about it on the podcast before. I had postpartum with my second son, and I appreciate that you shared that, because it's so important that women talk about it that you can get through it, but you do need help, and it's real, and it's dark, and it's very scary. And oftentimes you realize that you need help when it's almost too late. So thank goodness that you realized it before you crossed a threshold that you couldn't come back from.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. Everything you said is true. It is a scary thing, and it's not in your control. It is what it is. And so often those signs can go unnoticed for a long time. And that's what was happening. I and everyone around me, we were putting so much time and effort and so much attention into our daughter because she needed that. But there was not enough time and attention given to me. And I became an overnight caregiver to a child that, as those early days, she had a feeding tube. And that was very stressful for me to not be able to feed my daughter the way that I had envisioned. And so, yeah, absolutely. I'm a strong advocate for mental health and especially maternal health. That is something that I'm very passionate about.
So thinking about the business, you decide to start the business, you decide that for all these personal reasons, it really makes sense for the both of you. You both are talented in what your profession is, and being talented in a profession and running a business are two different things. So how did you, between the two of you, decide who would do what, and how did you know how to navigate your own startup?
I think to a certain extent, that part, for the most part, came, I don't want to say naturally, but I was always sort of the entrepreneurial spirit, if you will. I mean, I tried to start, I don't know how many companies prior to this, and nothing ever really got off the ground. There was always an excuse or a reason, quote unquote, for it. And this was sort of to a certain extent, the easy way in the sense of it was an industry we knew. We had both worked in agencies before, like we kind of knew the inner workings, if you will. And obviously we knew the work itself. And, we had some reputations built up. So at least locally in the Minneapolis area. So we were able to, take on clients through our network and things like that.
Mike and I have very, very complementary skill sets. So, my areas of expertise in digital marketing are, very complementary to Mike's areas of expertise in digital marketing, and also kind of in our own skill set. Mike is very analytical. He's very good with numbers. He's the type of person that likes to figure things out. So
I generally had a more of an interest in the business aspect of business as well. So I don't love accounting, but I'm at least interested in kind of figuring out how it all works. It kind of worked itself out in that sense.
Yeah, we knew that Mike was going to be in the CEO role, the lead of the company role, and that he was going to focus on, business development, the machinations of the business, the finances, sort of the operations. And then my role was going to be more on the marketing side and the promotion and the client services side. And that I was going to be, my role was going to be a little bit more internally focused, focusing on the team.
So tell me about Proofpoint now, and tell me about your perspective on family policies as you now are paying for other people's insurance.
Absolutely.
So from the very beginning, number one, we wanted to be remote. So we knew from the get-go that this was going to be a remote company. We were not going to have an office. And that was for a variety of reasons. One is we like the remote and we have it for a reason. And there's financial aspects to it as well. And we wanted to create a place where other people could spend time with their children. It doesn't matter if they're premature or not, but it's a pretty big problem in this country where there's, bad, paternity leave is starting to kind of happen, but it's virtually unheard of still, outside of the tech world for the most part. So that was something we right away wanted to put out there. So we right away said, okay, we're definitely going to do maternity and paternity leave. That was just going to be the thing that we did. And we'd figure out how to financially support that as we went along.
When we talked about our mission and our vision, so first let me back up and say that Proofpoint is a B2B digital marketing agency. I think we forgot to mention that. And yes, we are remote. We've been remote since the inception of the company. And our vision is to be, is around, family first, people first. And for us, that really stemmed from our experience with our daughter and needing to be at home with her, needing to have a high degree of flexibility to care for her needs. And also around the experience that I went through of losing my job. I think certainly, employers will have to let people go. That's the reality of being an entrepreneur, being a business owner. You hire, and then unfortunately there are times where you have to let people go. But we absolutely never wanted to be in a position to have to let somebody go due to a health or family circumstance such as that I went through. And that has been, a key guiding factor in everything that we do, is really putting the needs of our team first, of being people first, family first, allowing for a flexible work culture. And I think that a lot of companies, I think nowadays, especially because of pandemic and COVID situations, they are learning that, the family is the number one most important thing in this country is the institution of family. And when you negate that of your employees, when you don't honor that, it doesn't make for a positive work experience. It doesn't make for positive work-life balance, and you're going to lose people because of it. And I think also we're learning very quickly in this country that there is a lot of benefit to hiring people that don't necessarily fit into that box of what you think an employee should be. And there's another example. We worked with a number of contractors who had military spouses. And if you think about it, military personnel are constantly moving and traveling. And in this case, they were both women. they couldn't have a traditional job like you or I could have, a 9 to 5 kind of gig at a company for 3 to 4 years, because every couple of years they were moving. So they weren't able to really hone that part of their career. And I think that for us, because we're remote, we don't care if you work from Antarctica, as long as you have good internet, Wi-Fi, it doesn't matter to us where you work. And so we've been able to support, some military spouses that, for us, it feels phenomenal, because they're phenomenal at what they do. They love their work. They're extremely dedicated. And we feel blessed to be able to support, members of our nation's military, that their spouses are, as far as I'm concerned, if you're a military spouse, you are serving this country. And so to us, that's a huge blessing to be able to do that, to be able to hire people that may have at one time been considered undesirable employees. And also the fact that we're remote, it allows us to hire anyone from anywhere across the nation. And so we have employees in Philadelphia, in Maryland. We've hired folks that lived in Boston. And to us, that's a huge benefit. It's also a benefit to our clients, because we get to bring on talented people that are really just phenomenal at their work, at their job.
That's another shift that I think is really important, is that people are fighting for their families and saying, this is my family and these are my non-negotiables and this is what I'm not willing to do. And this concept that, okay, I'm going to have a baby, now I better build a nursery onto my office so that I don't even have to take a leave. That concept needs to die in this country, because we need to make sure that families can move into professional life if they so want to, however they so want to, and having these different flexible options, and having different companies out there saying, you know what, we support your family and we support your talent and we can make that work. And as companies like yours and companies like mine take really talented people from corporations who don't do that, maybe someday the corporations will realize the talent they're missing.
I could not have said that better. And that's exactly the guiding philosophy that we have here at Proofpoint. We knew from the very beginning that we wanted to create a company that was going to be different from anything that we had experienced in our career. And, I've both Mike and I have had a long career in marketing. It's funny because Mike has had some really wonderful employers and wonderful bosses, and he really soared in the trajectory of his career. And for me, I hit a couple of snags. I hit a couple of bumps along the road. I worked in companies where I didn't have great mentors. I didn't have great bosses. Culture was lacking, to say the least. And my talents were not always honed in a way that allowed me to succeed. And despite that, I still pushed forward. I still tried to make the best of my career. And we said that when we started our company, that we wanted to have transparency be at the core of everything we do, and honesty, and most importantly, family first, because we knew the reason why we started our company, and that was to be family first. Another piece of the pie for us that's really important is that we give back to the prematurity community. Every year we make a donation through Proofpoint. A portion of our profits we donate to a number of organizations that are near and dear to our heart. March of Dimes, Children's Minneapolis, the Preeclampsia Foundation, and the Minnesota Neonatal Foundation, which was started by the head neonatal doctor when Lana was in the hospital. So those are some organizations that we support both personally as well as through our company. And as we grow and as we are able to do more, we want to create more opportunities for our team to be able to give back to their organizations and their causes that they feel passionate towards, and that through Proofpoint we can support them as well through that.
Well, as we wrap up, your story has taken a lot of different turns, which, like all stories do, there is no path from this happened and then I started a business. There's a lot of twists and turns, and I appreciate you shared so many of them. And you're the first people on the podcast who reached out to us and said, we want to be on. So thank you. Thank you for finding us, and thank you for going to the Flip Your Script podcast website to reach out because your story is important and there's so many elements that can connect and help people. And we'll also put a link to your company as well on the website so that people can find you and read more about your story. So the last question is, what is there a quote from a book or a song that help you get through the dark times?
At that time, I don't think either of us had any time. It's more in hindsight where, like I said, probably for 6 to 12 months, I didn't even pick up a book or a magazine or anything. Just there's no time to even think about that. But in hindsight, pretty much the only stuff I read during that time were children's books. And one of the ones that we read a ton in the hospital to Lana was My Little Blue Truck, for anybody who's read that one. Thinking about it in hindsight, that book's all about, really asking for help from people. And we honestly could not have gotten through that journey without asking for help and without people helping out. Anything from our parents to our friends to coworkers or former coworkers, everybody sort of pitched in, and it was great, and we couldn't have done it otherwise.
For me, the quote that, again, not at the time, but sort of after things got going, something that I saw that I read on Instagram, and I loved it so much I printed it and I put it on my board, and it's hanging right in front of me every day when I come to my office. It's, nothing changes until you do. And it's a very simple, it's a very simple quote. I don't know who it's attributed to. It's one of those, catchy social media things, but at the same time, it was very profound to me because we went through so many changes, and those changes are integral to who we are today, to our story, and to why we ended up where we are today. And I think it's a good reminder because every day we do things that allow us to change, from micro activities, micro things that we do that we're not even, that are sort of rote in our mind, to big, profound changes that are thrusted upon us that we don't know don't know that we're going to get through it or didn't even expect it, but we get through it. And to me, that's an important reminder that, to really see the change that you want and to do something profound, you have to experience change. And sometimes change can be painful and unpleasant, to say the least. But at the end of it is something really profound that happens.
Well said. And it's taken me, 35, 40 minutes, but I've forgiven the gentleman who fired you, because had he not done that, you wouldn't have had the experience and the beautiful present that you currently have. So to your point, it's in the struggle. Good things can happen. The bummer is you have to get through the struggle. Absolutely. Yeah. And you did. Thank you for sharing your story. And the things that really have resonated with me is how the experience, a traumatic experience, sparked innovation. And there was always a leaning into the family. And what your family did was decide, this is what's most important for us, and we're going to make our professional lives support that and not the other way around. And that really is, in our corporate world, a big shift that's happening. So I love how you've done that. I appreciate the ways that you talked about the experience that you've had, the transparency, and your perspective, and how it has shaped your future. And go Lana. Hooray and happy birthday, little one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My hope is that Mike and Gaby's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Kristi Peel and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating and subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also check out flipyourscriptpodcast.com for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and information about our other great episodes.